That's how we all die.
It's a very complex situation because it can be seen as an event in history that lasted for however long it lasted for. This cancel culture or this instant rush to judgment based on essentially what amounts to polluted air that's exhaled. Quite a while back now, prior to the various movements that came out, a couple with, I'm sure, the best of intentions. However, it's so far out of hand now that I can promise you that no one is safe. Not one of you. Not one of you. Not anyone out that door. No one is safe as long as someone is willing to say one sentence. Takes one sentence and then there's no more ground. Yeah, no one's safe, but I believe that if you are armed with the truth, then that's all you need. Doesn't matter if a judgment per se has taken some artistic license.
Hey everyone, it's your boy Gary here. This is very new for me because I don't do videos like this, as you know. I'm the music guy, and well, first and foremost, big shout out to Mr. Donald Dolan, or as I like to call him, Donald the Depp Dolan, because he supports the community of hashtag justice for Johnny Depp. Like, well, I wouldn't say no other. He's a huge supporter, but there's a huge community behind it. And I was fortunate enough to find these people and become part of this community, because this is a serious thing, folks. And this video right here is just a little bit of a rant for me, because I want to let everybody out there know that DVDA, whatever you want to call it, for men and women, it's a very serious thing for both sides, you know. And men, in fact, can be victims too. All right? I mean, I can be punched by a woman and it probably wouldn't cause any serious damage, but it would hurt. But imagine this. Imagine if she had a knife in her hand. Imagine if she had a gun in her hand and all she had to do was pull the trigger. These things have happened. It's been proven. I mean, it's all over the place. So this is a very, very serious subject and not something to be taken lightly. So this is why I love the people that I've found in this community. And 2 and 3. What the hell is this? Oh God. I'm so tired, but I just can't seem to get no sleep, because there's something nasty in between my sheets. What the hell did she do to me this time? Oh, what the hell did she do to me this time? Oh, Amber, should I call you Amber? Waves of pain. You drive around with no pants on, what a shame. Stealing people's toilet paper, that's lame. When you can use the verdict from the UK. Oh, my Amber, waves of pain. You tried to ruin Johnny's name. Now he's gonna go to court with you, and you can never tell the truth. You'll get locked up in those chains. I hope you get locked up in those chains. Enjoy being locked up in those chains. Oh, my Amber, waves of pain. Look, for any of you, I've been following this Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case very closely. This is why I was able to have the pleasure of meeting all these wonderful people in this community. This stuff is real. And, well, obviously you can tell I'm not used to doing this. But for any of you out there that are just biased towards the women's side, and you actually still have a reason to support Amber Heard, like, well, maybe she's been through some stuff. I don't know. I don't know her life. I don't know her personally. We've heard allegedly that her father was that way to her. But that doesn't mean that gives you the right to do that to somebody else. You know, my sisters have been through that, my older sisters. But they're beautiful women. They're wonderful women. And they've never been that way towards anyone. You know? So, anyway, to any of you out there who just want to support the female side of all of this, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, please, before you start making any kind of accusations and start talking your junk, educate yourself, please, first. Please, just do a little bit of research. I mean, I came across this over a year ago already when I found Incredibly Average, his videos. They break it down well, his videos break it down for you in the best way I've ever seen. But then that brought me to other channels, like Spiritually Empowered Coaching, wonderful, wonderful woman. Stevie J. Raw, Shelby Soup, Nerdit's Newsstand even covered this, and Darth News, and they're like, you know, quirky, but Darth News is a trip, but even he's covered this and he understands it, he gets this. But if you want like a real legal standpoint to break it down for you, Lost Beyond Pluto is the way to go, because all of the legal documents are out there. And they all have them. I've seen them, I've read them, but she breaks it down to a legal standpoint, and I mean the evidence is just clear. It's obvious. So
it's difficult to imagine what Me Too advocates really think about Amber Heard in private, but they know they have no choice but to keep siding with her in public. They just cannot concede women may lie on occasion, because a fundamental tenet of their ideology is that women must be believed. And if women must be believed, that means they must lack the intellectual complexity and any motivation to ever lie. Believe women and believe all women are popular hashtags, which are meant to create the illusion that, by default, women are not believed. We're constantly being told just how powerless women are and how difficult it is for us to receive justice if we've been victims of a crime. But none of this is generally true. Of course, I understand that there are certain situations in which speaking out against a perpetrator can be difficult. For example, if an employee is being harassed by her employer. When the perpetrator is a high-status individual, it can indeed take a lot of courage to say anything to anyone. But once a woman has said something, especially if she's able to present some evidence, her allegation is extremely likely to be taken seriously. The premise of the Me Too movement is that the average woman is powerless in comparison to the average man. This is not true, as I have shown in my other videos. I don't buy into this generalized female victimhood narrative, and in my experience, most of the women who do buy into it do so in order to use their victimhood to make others sympathize with them and give them what they want. Ironically, the biggest achievement of the Me Too movement is that it has shown just how powerful women's complaints and grievances are. A woman's word alone is enough to ruin an innocent man's life. The same cannot be said of men. Nobody encourages men to complain. They're just told to suck it up and get on with it, while women are treated as babies who need constant attention to make sure they are okay. Victimhood-obsessed Me Too feminists will tell you we need to talk more about how difficult life is for women. I disagree. I think what we should be talking more about is how difficult women make life for others, including for other women. I believe the Me Too hysteria has only made it more difficult for women to be taken seriously and considered to be equal to men. I don't want the world to view me as weak, helpless, and lacking in agency. At no point in my life have I felt less powerful than the average man, but I have certainly felt more powerful on countless occasions. I've been watching in horror how women like Amber Heard, Evan Rachel Wood, and Esme Bianco are retelling medieval tales about women's fragility, inferior judgment, and lack of agency, disguised as progressive ideas. By proudly infantilizing themselves, women like these are destroying lives and boosting their own careers, while being cheered on by a mob that continues to claim women have no power in this patriarchy we're living in. It is quite an achievement for an oppressed class to be able to orchestrate a mass hysteria at such a gigantic scale and get exactly what they want. To be put on a pedestal and be treated as royalty whose words must always be believed due to an accident of birth. It's good to see that more and more people, including women, are questioning the credibility of the Me Too movement. Amber Heard is partly responsible for this. Many feminists seem concerned they might lose the benefits that come with their victim status. And in a desperate attempt to save the Me Too movement, they are now defending Amber Heard, making themselves look absolutely ridiculous in the process. This article in The Independent is a great example of how Me Too ideologues are losing any semblance of reason. It tells us exactly what goes on in the mind of feminists who are panicking at the thought of people finally realizing women may actually be capable of lying. Remember Me Too? Time's up? Enough is enough? How about believe women? Only 5 years ago, we seemed to be on the brink of a sea change, finally turning the tide against culturally embedded misogyny. The Me Too hashtag seemed to offer a glimpse into the immense scale of sexual violence, abuse, and harassment against women across the world. Me Too was supposed to herald a new age with increased understanding of the dynamics of abusive relationships, the maltreatment of survivors of sexual violence, and the socio-cultural context that supports perpetrators and allows them to hide in plain sight. When Harvey Weinstein was brought to account for years of abuse against women, it seemed to signal that enough really was enough in Hollywood, and that women might now be respected, even believed. But then came Depp versus Heard 2.0, and all that has gone before seems to count for nothing. Here we have the familiar demand that women must be automatically respected and believed. In other words, Women deserve privileges because we possess a certain purity of heart and soul which prevents us from ever doing anything wrong. But that's not equality, is it? That's turning back the clock to a time where women were considered innately innocent, angelic, and too irrational to make decisions for themselves. It turns out Me Too is a deeply regressive movement, after all. The truth is, no one has the right to be respected or believed unconditionally. Respect is something that must be earned. First, respect yourself and acknowledge that you are a complete human being capable of both good and evil deeds. Second, take responsibility for your actions and live life in a way that evokes respect for you in other people. And if you make a claim, be prepared to back it up and be ready for people to ask questions. Pretending to cry is not good enough. Don't expect anyone to believe you without evidence. This week, we watched a woman sob as she recounted several alleged sexual assaults perpetrated by her ex-husband. The response? She was ridiculed for overacting and tearless crying. We listened to her descriptions of the attacks, the graphic details she had to deliver to a packed courtroom and a global audience. The reaction? Pinocchio filters added to recordings of her testimony. We looked on as she whispered, "I don't want to do this anymore. I can't believe I'm having to do this." The reply on social media? Derision and the creation of memes mocking her facial expressions. Well, I'm sorry, but most people are not blind or dumb. Anyone with an average level of intelligence and some life experience will notice that there are some serious problems with Amber Heard's testimony. Colonel Kurtz and others have talked about these in detail. And no, it's not misogynistic to call out inconsistencies, absurd claims, and bad acting. There were no special measures in the court. She had to take the stand directly facing the alleged perpetrator, who at one point smirked during her testimony. The court was so lax that as the woman left the stand for the morning break, she almost ran into the alleged perpetrator as he was leaving the room. If there are no special measures, that's because she didn't ask for them. There were moments when I was beginning to feel genuinely sorry for Amber Heard because of her obvious mental health issues. But this author is taking it way too far. As if rape reporting rates aren't meager enough, how many women would even consider sexual violence disclosure after witnessing the treatment? How many women felt physically sick listening to the testimony and then seeing the judgments, insults, and derision across social media? What the hell happened to Me Too? I wonder how many women who suffered actual domestic violence found Amber Heard's failed attempts to fake emotions very disturbing. Don't worry, I already know the likely response to this article. Why can't Me Tooers understand that men can also be victims of domestic violence? Bloody hell, women can be so sexist. And of course, Depp was smirking during his ex-wife's testimony. Wouldn't you laugh in disbelief if someone was telling outrageous lies about you in court? The author of this article pretends to acknowledge that men can also be victims of domestic violence, but then goes on to assume that Amber Heard is the victim in this case, and Johnny Depp's supporters are blinded by his fame and charisma. This is deeply condescending towards all of those who have chosen to stand with Johnny, having carefully scrutinized the evidence presented by both parties. Despite all that's gone before and all that's been heard and shown in evidence, the crowds still gather, uploading or holding Justice for Johnny placards to welcome their idol at the court gates. Immediately following the testimony of his ex-wife, they'll wave and smile encouragingly to him as he leaves the courtroom. I have no idea what evidence she's referring to, considering that Amber's side hasn't been able to show any proof that Johnny was ever the one to initiate a fight. On the other hand, There are plenty of recordings where Amber clearly admits that she was the aggressor and she assaulted Johnny on several occasions. The article ends with #RIP_MeToo. I don't think Me Too should rest in peace. I think it should burn in hell. If it really is dead, then good riddance. The femme fatale is lying on sheets of white satin in a pool of her exquisite blood. Some of her admirers are collecting the precious liquid in vintage crystal flasks, glimmering in the light left in the world, trying to preserve at least this one color, while all others are fading away. With no passion and laughter allowed, everything is turning grey. Others are covering themselves in it, yet others are consuming it greedily. The femme fatale is dying, but she's still breathing, and it's not too late to save her from a cruel demise. All it takes is acknowledging her supreme role in the history of mankind. She was the first person to ever walk upright. Even more than that, she was the first ever ape worthy of being called a person. The first man stood up straight, reaching for her, and they perfected their tools and tamed fire in an attempt to impress her. But then, ironically, her hypnotic gaze made men fall back on the ground to her feet. And ever since then she's been resurrecting their animal instincts. The moment she first saw her glorious reflection in a lake, she understood her power. That moment sealed humanity's fate. And since then she's been leading the way. Billions of men have died for her. She started wars and revolutions. She's inspired great inventions and the most brilliant pieces of art, making the men around her always work hard, trying to capture her attention, hoping to eventually capture her. And if that didn't work, they would murder each other to reduce the competition. But her strength is complex, not as straightforward as men's, and so it's difficult to comprehend without any first-hand experience of being on its receiving or giving end. And she's now being tortured by girls who don't understand her power, thinking it somehow makes them weaker. Instead of searching for it within themselves, they're screaming, men and women are identical. And as the hungry vulture of feminism circles in the grey sky above her, the men who fear and worship her are fighting the angry mob of self-proclaimed freedom warriors trying to protect her. But less and less people believe that her life matters. In a soft, lukewarm, humorless world, without any facts and truth to be guided by, a loud, faceless crowd can't wait to be fed the femme fatale's beautiful heart and priceless, sweet flesh by the journalists of the New York Times and The Guardian.
and Porky's. We talk so much about mental health and how important it is and how we have to remember that mental health is just as important as physical health, and then to discard people at the first sign of something we dislike. The two don't marry very well to me. We undermine how easy it is for us to become the people that we dislike. With a different circumstance, a different upbringing, a different culture, how I could easily become a lot of the things that I dislike or find harmful. And it's because of my own propensity to become those things. I'm hesitant about labeling things evil. I'm hesitant not because I don't think people can be ill-intended. I think that would be naive. But I'm much more interested in the root causes as opposed to the symptoms. How do we get to this state where people think that, let's say, sex is an entitlement for them? People abuse power because we attribute it so easily to people. We treat people with fame and money like they are inherently different. I listen to a lot of music, I read a lot of writers, but my interest in them doesn't make them seem superior to me. It doesn't negate the fact that they could be harmful people in their private life. If we stop treating talent like it's synonymous with character, I think we will be a lot less disappointed in entertainers and some of our favorite people. If you have committed a crime, a violent crime, a sexual crime, you should pay those consequences. I know a lot of people don't change, but I would never suggest that people can't change. They often do. I have. Many people I know have. And especially when you're met with the toughest adversity, I think that's a great mirror for change. I would say that it's easier to condemn people than ideas, because if we were to condemn ideas, we would see how those ideas have affected us at one point. We would see how those ideas are embedded in structures that we still defend. Oh, no one has a monopoly on toxic ideas. They kind of exist in all cultures. Changing your mind does confirm that you are still thinking. If you can look back on yourself 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, or maybe even a year, and slightly cringe, without hating yourself, I think you are moving in the right direction. Part of the beauty of living is that we get to change our minds, update our beliefs, we challenge ourselves, confront ourselves, and hopefully that brings a further understanding of who we are and who we are in relation to other people and how we are similar. So I think we should all be a little more humble, and we should always remember that just because something is popular, it doesn't make it good. There's a lot of things that are popular that are not good. There are a lot of things in history that have been popular that are not good. Sometimes popularity is just a measure of how much people aren't thinking. If your advocacy or activism is motivated by the fear of being cancelled, then you will adopt the popular belief. Mob culture is very terrifying. But I think if you are committed to trying to make the world a better place, or your community a better place, your society, your culture, you have to be prepared to think for yourself. Even if we look into the lives of some of the most prolific activists and thinkers, we're going to find chaos. And that's not necessarily because they're hypocrites. I don't think so at all. I think it's because they're human. So mistakes are how we find ourselves. It's how we learn. And I think there's something on the internet that encourages us to see the world as a fight between good and evil. And it's not that. We're a combination of it all. We should be a bit more forgiving on people's mistakes. We have to make mistakes. Life is trial and error. Awareness is understanding how much you don't know. And a lot of my beliefs and ideas are constantly being shattered. And I really welcome it. I don't know about an objective truth, but at least if you're someone who's seeking a deeper understanding, you welcome being wrong. It's a pleasure to be wrong, because when you are wrong, you are closer to being right. Maybe the first sign of knowing anything is knowing you know nothing at all.
We learned the shocking news about Harvey Weinstein. Soon after, we heard about more monsters in everyday places. The Me Too hashtag took off and a movement was formed. More women came forward, more powerful men were fired. But just as quickly, some men were unfairly caught in the crossfire. Matt Damon said that groping someone's butt was different from sexually molesting a child. The mob said he was callous, misinformed, and part of the problem. An anonymous woman described a disappointing date with Aziz Ansari, and suddenly, bad hookups were added to the list. Some women said the problem was the male power structure itself, and soon smashing the patriarchy was added to the long list of goals. It seemed that almost every woman had some kind of experience or goal that she wanted to add to the agenda. No problem was too small or too vague to be included, so long as a man was to blame. The women's movement in America began at the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, and it also included a long list of goals. Soon enough, leaders focused on one goal: suffrage. It was a reckoning, a watershed moment, and it changed the country forever. If Me Too is going to change America, it needs to focus on its original and most serious goal: ending the kind of workplace sexual harassment that has plagued women ever since they entered the workforce.
Hi guys, I'm Justin. I'm 21 and I'm majoring in sociology.
My name is Sydney. I'm an American-Australian YouTuber and political commentator.
I'm Avi. I'm a creative and a community designer.
Hi, my name's Chelsea. I'm a community organizer and activist.
Hi, my name is Dave Sussman. I am a co-host at America's Voice Live and America's Voice News, and I have a television show called Whiskey Politics.
My name is Blair White. I'm a YouTuber. I also do a social and political commentary.
The Me Too movement is a witch hunt.
Yeah, I feel like every good intention in the world in the beginning, but I feel like it's spiraled a bit, and there's been some people that have been sort of wrongfully canceled, as we say. Aziz Ansari comes to mind, who was canceled for not basically reading the mind of the woman who withdrew consent after having sex with him. I feel like people shouldn't be collateral damage, and rape accusations really destroy someone's life.
It's a paradigm now where you have men as the universal perpetrator and women as the universal victim. That's for me what it's become. And I just think it's hugely problematic. And I mean, how can you vilify like half the population?
Men are not even allowed to be a part of this dialogue. A lot of men are abused in corporations. So it isn't just about women, it is about the abuse of power.
I have a big issue with the term witch hunt. It feels like a very convenient political term to sort of distance ourselves from what's really happening in the Me Too movement. So
what would you term it as then?
I think it's a movement to examine the power structures and the very real ways that people are falling victim to predation that is upheld by a criminal justice system that allows it to continue to be the case.
But I think that there is a similarity when you consider the fact that many people who support the hashtag and the movement, they really do set aside due process, which is really what happened to women during the actual witch hunts. I think that a lot of times when you see hashtags like believe all women, believe women, and there's no nuance, and that just has to be the case.
But when we get into, you're not saying believe some women, or you're not saying not all men, that we're not really getting at the core of the issue, which is the abuse. And it's not saying like men are all bad or anything like that, but it is saying that maybe we should examine the people who are in power, and since most of those people in power are men, then perhaps we should examine the dynamics and gender and everything like that.
I think that there's definitely a space for discussing sexual assault, sexual harassment, and I think that's awesome to bring it to light. But I think that it's become pretty toxic as a general topic, because I think it's become something that's more about vilifying men than necessarily helping people.
Our justice system does not handle assault cases appropriately and fairly.
I mean, think about the entire process, right? From the time an incident happens till a moment where some form of justice is received. The onus is on the victim, the survivor, to navigate the entire system, right? So we're talking about having to share your truth, which is the darkest experience you may have ever been through. Police reporting, the evidence collection is an extremely excruciating process for people, and so often we don't even have the funds available. And then you look at the facts and data, that so few people end up in jail, so few people even get their day in court.
Absolutely, and I think too, I mean, again, how you said it puts the onus on the victim already, is you have to prove that something happened to you. And what's difficult about that is, again, a lot of these situations are happening with people in power. I mean, if two people are in a room together and there was like no witnesses or no anything, then it's already, I mean, you're already disbelieved because it's your word versus theirs.
What about the thousands of men that are accused in corporations that we've never heard of before, that may not have the socioeconomic power to defend themselves, not only in court, but also in the court of public opinion, and maybe they were falsely accused? How do you prove a negative? How do you prove that something didn't happen when it's a he said, she said?
Well, I think we're getting a little twisted, though. I thought the criminal justice system was innocent until proven guilty, which
Yes.
again is it means
It's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be.
and it is, because it means that the burden of evidence is on the person who is trying to say.
To me, I just think there's this assumption that, oh, you can't disprove a negative, but really it's easier to say that this woman is coming forward or this man is coming forward because they want to get ahead in their career than it is to say that this person who we've trusted in our company, this person who we've trusted in this industry has been abusing that power for years. How is it that all of these women are all of a sudden just coming forward? Maybe they're coming forward now because there is a space, and maybe because of the nature of trauma, they are just now really kind of like addressing what had happened to them.
I'm a rape victim. I was raped at 18. I understand that you don't really come to terms with that sometimes until like a while later. Like I wasn't able to like really be like, say the words I was raped until I was probably 23, 24, which is like 5 years after. The harsh reality is if you don't seek justice immediately, you don't get a rape kit, and you come forward 20 years later, there's not really gonna be much of a case for you. So I think what's really important is that yes, like supporting people who come forward with these accusations, but also teaching people of any gender that when something like that happens to you, you have to immediately seek help.
To me, it's like revolutionary in the sense of giving power and voice to people who are kind of told to be silent because it's more comfortable for society and for predators who may be in powerful positions.
I fear false accusations.
I am a big proponent of equality with women. I don't want to be, because I'm on the anti-Me Too side here, classified as a misogynist. I believe that the Me Too movement has swung way too far, and a lot of men that I know are deeply concerned about, and I refer to the Harvard Business Review study that just came out 3 months ago that suggested that 58% of men are deeply concerned about being falsely accused. That's changed my behavior in my life. I will no longer date somebody in my industry. What's going to happen in 6 months or in a year from now when we've had a great relationship and it comes to its natural course of end and something happens where she's got this idea in her head that I did something to wrong her? All she needs to say is, he sexually assaulted me, he did something, and then it's he said, she said, and I lose my job, I lose my income, I can no longer support my boys.
That does not happen.
It absolutely happens.
It does not happen.
It happens every single day.
No, mostly people are pushed off. Okay, it could happen.
I think that you're talking about, well, men are scared now to, be alone or whatever, and I think that's really just like men finally being held accountable or maybe not even held accountable, just like be aware of the space that you're taking up and your actions. So yeah, we're talking about false accusations, and I've been falsely accused of sexual assault, and absolutely nothing has happened to me. My reputation is not ruined. I can get a job, I can go to school because I didn't sexually assault anyone.
With all due respect, you're at a much different place in your life than other people who have careers, who have jobs, who have families. You're a college student, and you are not at a place right now where you're carrying those responsibilities.
But I think like why are you, if you know you're a good dude and you don't inappropriately touch women, like what?
He doesn't know the women are good women.
So for the past 30 years, I've been working in corporations, and I've worked with a lot of phenomenal, incredible, dynamic, powerful women. Maybe 10 years ago, I was going on business trips and we were having dinners and, people are having drinks and things can happen. I'm not suggesting that anything inappropriate happened. But today, that would not be something that I would entertain. It's not about me being uncomfortable. It is that 58% of men, that's 60% almost of men today say that they are uncomfortable being in a business relationship with a woman where they cannot be on a one-to-one. And that is impacting women in their ability to progress in corporations. And I don't want to see that.
I fear false accusations because when we actually look at what a false accusation is, it's an incomplete accusation.
Or it's a lie. It can be a lie too.
or it's an accusation where the police were unable to obtain all necessary information in order to pursue whatever truth was there. You're right, there could be a small percentage of lies in there, but we also can't get blinded by what we think or want to think a false accusation is because it's politically convenient, because we want to, make it sound like, well, it's your responsibility to ensure your economic future, so, take it as a serious threat that I don't want to be with women in a space because of what's happening. I feel like all of us are talking about real harm, real harm. And so it's sad that we talk about false accusations and we start throwing all these distractions out there when there's real harm that we could probably all be really good at solving together.
I think that the Me Too movement is an extremely important subject. It's changed our politics, it's changed our business, and unfortunately it's changing our culture, impacting younger men. The idea of having confidence to go and talk to a young woman that you find attractive, that builds confidence in men. And if they don't get that confidence from that, they're not finding it elsewhere, and we're starting to see men turn inward. They're playing video games more, they're going to porn more, they're not getting off the couch, and that's going to impact them later in life.
The lines between harassment, assault, and rape are being blurred.
Y'all don't agree at all? Okay.
So if you're in the workplace and somebody puts their hand on your waist and it's unwanted and you go to human resources, the person who did that could be accused of sexual assault. Now, if you get any man on the street or any man or woman on the street and say to them, so-and-so was convicted of sexual assault, in that person's mind, that's the same as okay, and so yes, there are a tremendous number of levels that are going to differentiate the seriousness between the hand on the waist, which is unwanted, and should be dealt with. If somebody touches you in a way that you're not comfortable with, you should say to that person, I'm uncomfortable with you touching me this way.
There was a study that was done in Australia on college campuses that basically tried to measure how many women have experienced it had a very small fraction of men in that too, but it was predominantly women, how many have experienced sexual assault and things like that on campus. And the number came back and it was very high. But what they'd included in that was leering, like someone leering at you. And so I think that part of the problem is that none of this is cool, none of it's okay, none of it is acceptable. But I think what's happening is that we're conflating these things that are not on the same page. Right. And all it does is inflate the numbers and makes things look much worse than they actually are, and it doesn't reflect the reality of how things actually are.
These things that you consider to be less than leering, touching, harassment versus rape, by saying that there is a
rape
legally it is less, but there
legally
is
or just in general.
As I'm trying to say, when you're grooming someone, and this is something that people do, they test little things. Like if I look at her in a way that makes her uncomfortable, or them or him in a way that makes them uncomfortable, how are they going to react? If they don't react to that, then you're constantly, these are seen as green lights by predators to increase that behavior. This is my issue with people who are anti-Me Too, is that they look at small details and say that takes the power away from other things.
Context matters.
All of these
and
context matters. Context
matters.
When you say that 81% of women have been sexually assaulted, including leering and someone entering your body, which is rape.
Okay, so let's take away
that.
Let's take away
and
that.
It's creating
1
hysteria.
in 4 women
it's
are actually raped. That's 25% of women.
No, those numbers have been debunked. As a father, as a mother, would you ever send your daughters to college knowing that 1 in 5 chance of them being raped? Why are women young girls being sent to college with those statistics?
Well, here you go again. You're denying us economic opportunity and upward mobility because of the situation that happens.
That's so far out of left field.
Well, that's the question that you're asking us. No. I challenge the question because it comes from a place of denying women upward mobility based on a situation that we can't control. I think when you look historically, we've had such limited ways of talking about unwanted and unwelcomed behavior that happens to us. So I think it's a really amazing moment actually that we're in, that the language of leering and rape are put on a spectrum.
But they're not really on a spectrum when they're lumped in as the term sexual
Well, you're
assault.
talking about media's limited ability to communicate these things. But
also
what you're
Me Too.
challenging it based
Also Me Too.
But here we are, Me Too, and here I am dealing with nuance.
But I think
and so
you're
when you
an
sit here and
anomaly.
say that nuance is it's not here, it's not a part of the conversation, you're erasing me.
I think you're actually an anomaly in a lot of this, because when you talk to a lot of people about this topic, you get this very overarching one way is the highway perspective. When you have these figureheads that are saying 81% of the population that is a woman is, going to be sexually assaulted in her lifetime, and not breaking down what that means, that's huge. And then you have young people who are being influenced by that. So no, it's like intellectually dishonest to run with something like that. And the worst part is, sorry Blair, all we ever talk about is women. I am so sick of hearing about women. I hate the fact that, women they experience this, but how about we talk about what men go through for a hot second? Because I will tell you now, it will probably be in the same frequency. Men are in the home at the same frequency by women as women.
You're totally right, and it was one of the big failures early on of the Me Too movement, that it centered the stories of white women explicitly. I say here as a white woman, that it was really focused on celebrity, like they need more media attention and more power at their backs. And meanwhile, hotel keepers and houseworkers, and there were so many people who are experiencing the same types of power dynamics on smaller scales, but are never gonna get the media spotlight.
The media wants to create a victim, they want to create clicks. And so they use the most sensational headlines so that they get those clicks. Context does matter. Because when you're talking about individual human beings, they have their own lives. And I'm not talking about a Louis C.K. who's got millions in the bank. I'm talking about some guy that's earning 50, 60, 100 grand a year that could barely survive. I think we agree on a lot more than we disagree with here.
Me Too was a way for survivors to find each other and to connect. I'm so supportive of the need to find connection in some of the darkest experiences people have in their lives. And for the movement where it's going today, I think there's a great need for accountability and to fix some of the most broken systems in our country today.
Anybody that abuses their power should be held accountable. So conversations like this, I think, are really good. They're productive, they're important. Thank you, ladies, for sharing your stories. And hopefully we all gain a lot out of this.
I think that violence and harassment and sexual assault against women is happening at disproportionate levels. We're not saying men, it doesn't happen to men, or it can't happen to men, or it's not important when it happens to men and we shouldn't hear men's voices. Me Too is for us as well. Like, we benefit from it just as much as you guys do. But I think we probably agree with a lot more with each other than things we disagree.
Thank you. Great job.
Our current approach to victimhood is extremely disempowering and destructive for actual victims. That approach is pretty much don't talk about it, just tell them that they're not to blame. Victim mentality is the perspective that I have no power over my external environment or the people in it. Therefore, I have no responsibility for how I respond. Already sounding pretty disempowering and oxymoronic, right? But it gets worse. When we put our positive identity in victimhood, when that mentality molds our identity, we begin associating importance and moral superiority with being wronged. So victimhood becomes associated with reward. This is extremely destructive, but we're scared to talk about it because we don't want to be called victim blamers, and no one really understands where the difference is between encouraging personal responsibility and blame. When I began to seek help for PTSD after multiple sexual assaults and an abusive relationship, I was reminded constantly that I was a victim and I had zero responsibility. But that solace provided by victims advocates, Me Too, Facebook activists, soon turned into a bottomless pit of rage and despair because I was a victim with a lose-lose legal case and a crazy ex who was back in town stalking and threatening me. For me, it came down to take personal responsibility or possibly die. And that's why this is so important. It's so important that we open up this conversation because that doesn't have to be the case for everyone. That being said, taking personal responsibility is something that no one can do for you. That's where victim blaming becomes a problem. But it is something that everyone who loves you and wants to see you succeed should encourage you to do. So I encourage you all to open up this conversation and begin looking in the mirror. You have no idea what's possible when you do this. No shame or guilt or blame, just honesty, responsibility, and compassion. 2 years ago, I was smoking weed and cigarettes. I was repeatedly being assaulted and abused, and I was a complete mess with PTSD. Since then, I've dropped out. I've traveled to 6 new countries for 8 months and been hired at a hiring sales position, quit that position because I wasn't happy, and created my own business, which makes me very happy. Since taking personal responsibility, I've been able to create a reality that's worth existing in for me. And that is completely possible for you too. You have no idea, but the problem is most people don't know how to get there, and it's a tough road to navigate. So I know there's a lot of doubt initially that this is empowering, that taking responsibility is empowering. It's scary. And it's scary to bear that power and that responsibility for creating your reality, but it's so worth it.